legend.
Hey guys, and welcome back to yet another interview. Today I brought you someone who I wanted to have for quite a lot of time now, and we do get the chance. Is none other than Drisoth, the runner-up for the Mastering Runeterra NA Open that took place last weekend. How are you doing, my guy?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am doing great. But this week I had a lot of new faces that weren't on the interviews before, you included. So could you tell us a bit about yourself, what you're doing IRL when you're not playing Runeterra, for example?
My day job is doing data stuff, which probably wouldn't surprise anybody who follows me already. I do a lot of stats work for Legends of Runeterra, and I actually did stats work for previous card games. My other card game stuff, I played a lot of Magic the Gathering in the past, but I've drifted away from that game as time went on. And I don't really have a whole lot of excitement in my life right now. I think a lot of people are cooped up at home, and that's very much my situation. So, not the most interesting life these days.
You mentioned Magic the Gathering, so I need to ask you what your background in terms of card games before you came to play Runeterra.
Almost entirely Magic the Gathering. I did have a little bit of school lunch table experience with stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, but never played them competitively in the slightest. Never got more than I have a starter deck with some cards that I added from some packs I opened in either of those two games. Magic, I was heavily invested in, played a whole lot of Magic, have had reasonable success, but nothing super high profile. But if I don't try and hide my real name in Legends of Runeterra, my real name is Michael Lupa. If you search Michael Lupa, like MTG, you'll find a significant list of results. I played a whole lot in the DFW area, which is where I lived, Dallas-Fort Worth, for anybody who doesn't know that acronym. And I was not a person that you wanted to get paired against in the area that I was playing in. It was the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's actually a point in time that we had semi-regular 1K events, and the entry fee was $35, I want to say. Anyways, if you made top 8, you got paid $50, and the entry fee was less than that. And there was a point in time that I showed up to the store, and the store owner just looked at me and said, "I'll take it out of your winnings. I'm not going to take your entry fee. I'll just assume you're going to make top 8." And I did make top 8, so he wasn't punished, but I think I played 8 or 9 of those in a 1-year span. It was pretty much every month I would go play one, and I made top 8 in all but one, where I just always was in top 8.
Are you proud of any result in particular that you achieved in Magic?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting comparing Magic to almost any other card game, because Magic is by far the largest. I think Yu-Gi-Oh has a little bit more dominant of an online presence because of China, I think. Not sure about that, but I think there is another game that has a more dominant presence in specifically online card games. But Magic, as far as paper, just kind of dominates the competitive paper card game space. And it's kind of interesting. I think if you're talking truly the best players in Magic, I think Paulo Vitor Damarosa has the best claim for being the best Magic player of all time. And comparing them to the best of other card games, they definitely come out on top. But the best of Legends of Runeterra compete very reasonably to the local best of Magic. It's not like Magic just has better players. You have a larger population, so you're going to find more of the real top tier. But I think people kind of have this bias where they think Magic players are just somehow better, and I don't think that's the case. I think there's just more of them, and so if you have more people, you're going to find more people who excel.
So what made you move away or switch to Runeterra?
I think if you ask any Magic player to complain about Magic, they will complain about a lot of printings in the past couple of years, without just going into a laundry list of complaints that I have about recent printings. I think a lot of the recently printed cards don't have a level of thought put into them of does this create enjoyable gameplay? There's been a lot of printings recently that may not be just overtly broken, but they're not the most fun to engage with. There's also been some recent printings that are just overtly broken, but I think there's a lot of cards that could really have used a little more thought put into them of like, what does the world look like when this card is good? And oftentimes that world is not very fun.
Probably the biggest issue in card games is once you release a card, you cannot change it as easily as in a digital card game. So I guess that was a big factor as well.
Yes. Yeah, if Magic was able to patch, I think we would not have as severe issues right now. And they've actually started patching a little bit. A lot of people are engaging with Magic only through Arena, which is a digital platform. And so there's a recent time that they like released a format that had a bunch of banned cards legal again, but with patches applied, where like they just nerfed them. And that's really unheard of for a paper game. I mean, no paper game messed with errata that heavily. Paper calls patching errata because it wasn't software patches. It was whatever errata came from. But that was the only time that Magic has ever done significant like kind of patching. There's been a little bit of like tangential stuff to that. Occasionally through its history, it's had like rules changes that would change how cards work, but they tried very hard to not have power level changes from a card errata. And I mean, obviously, if you change the rules, it'll change the power level a little bit, but they really tried to avoid it. So it's interesting that they are leaning into that space.
Oh, I guess they're learning from other digital card games. So, how did you actually start your Runeterra journey, or how did you come about LR?
So, right back at the start of beta, I'm actually I have the Moonstruck Poro little familiar. It's my favorite one to use. I like cosmetic things that aren't just like I spent money on this game. I like cosmetic things that mean something. So, this might come up in the later part, but I played in Worlds, so I have the Worlds competitor card back. I'm really happy to have that card back. And I started playing Legends of Runeterra right at the very start of release. I kind of drifted away because at that point I was still playing Magic pretty heavily. But right around got released, which is Cosmic Creations. I think I'm cutting out, but yeah, I think it was Cosmic Creations when Zoe came out. Anyways, regardless of what the set name was called, I got back into Legends of Runeterra right after Zoe released. That was like go hard meta for the more relevant deck to ground that time frame. And I just kind of drifted away from Magic enough that I was looking for other card games, and I played in that meta, and I really enjoyed the game. I thought the game was really even prior to my problems with Magic, I think Legends of Runeterra is a better game than Magic. I do think Magic games rise to higher heights. When a Magic game is really, really good, it ends up better than the best games from Legends of Runeterra. But if you've ever played Magic, you've probably had the experience of getting flooded or screwed because Magic has a land system, and you can sometimes just not draw lands or draw too many lands and just lose the game. And I would say something like 30% of Magic games are non-games where it's not just that like you lose the game and have nothing you could do about it. You could also win the game and have nothing you could do about it, where this game was unlosable from turn one. And you have unwinnable games as well. And frankly, that's just not the greatest gameplay, where like 30% of your games, almost no actions by either player mattered. The result was almost predetermined. And Legends of Runeterra just vastly cuts down on that, which significantly improves it. And even though like 10% of games from Magic really rise to these absurd heights and are amazing, just removing 30% garbage is so valuable. So even prior to my problems with Magic, I like Legends of Runeterra as a game more, and certainly with my problems with Magic, I'm happy to be here. So,
What do you like about the Legends of Runeterra so much that keeps you hooked to it?
pass system and spell mana. The pass system really, really makes it compelling, even in a lot of situations where there's like relevant decisions to be made at all points in time. So, like for example, I was just scrimming to try and prep for seasonals, where I was playing Ziggs Poppy Burn versus Into the Mirror, which in almost any other card game, Burn versus Burn is going to be one of the most boring mirrors ever invented, where you're both just racing each other down. No one's trying to interact. You're just trying to kill your opponent as fast as possible. And I was repeatedly having these situations where on turn 2, I have the token, and depending on what my opponent plays, I'd like to play like, okay, do I have to play the 2/3 that pings a unit to deal 2? Because I really don't want to play that because I don't have a 1-drop in play because I traded it off on turn 1. But if my opponent plays 2 1-drops, I really do need to play this because I need to have the best blocker. Or do I want to play Conchologist if my opponent only plays 1 2-drop? And so you get into these situations where you can almost convince yourself to open pass in a burn mirror. And you're like, this is insane, where like I can just not take an action on turn 2 in an aggro mirror. That's absurd. Like, how did you make a game where this is like a reasonable decision to be made, where like not just what do I play, but do I even play anything? Um, and the pass system really, really makes this thing where like in a lot of card games, you'll end up with these choices of what action do I take? But the pass system and also spell mana helps with this, where like even in these fairly trivial decisions where it's like, okay, it's turn 3, I only have 1 playable card. You also get this additional option of, do you play anything? Because in Magic, going an entire turn without spending your mana probably loses you the game in a lot of states. But spell mana and the ability of like, we mutually decide when to end the turn, sometimes results in situations where you might want to do nothing at all. It happens a lot with control decks. You'll always hear about people talking about pass, but all the time you're in this situation of like, okay, if we both gain a mana crystal, am I ahead? And if you are, maybe you should just pass and react to your opponent.
I think LR comes with this decision because it asks a question that other card games don't ask most of the time. Does my opponent need to do something? Right?
Yes, yeah. The way that like the turn flows because of it, where like we both have input on when the turn ends, is just like so amazing. I think it's like honestly the best design decision in any card game ever. Um, and I would pair them. I wouldn't give them credit for like both the pass system and spell mana because I don't think either one works without the other. But it's just so good compared to every other card game that you have these relevant choices even when you have only one choice. Lore just always gives you a second choice of like, would you like to do nothing at all?
All right. I'm sure the guys watching now have enjoyed these technicalities, but let's move forward to the thing that everyone wants to see, and that is the
Sure.
lineup that got you to the runner-up position. And first and foremost, I'm seeing Draven Sion most of the time in most of the lineups, and I'm seeing it in yours too. So what was the call for it?
So Draven Sion, I was pretty happy with this deck. I wish I had been tracking like individual win rates, but I know it went positive and it was banned twice. So the stuff that like relevant decision points, I played 2 survival skills because I copied this list from Salty Simon and then started editing, and he was playing 2, so that's why I have 2. I actually don't like it given the current state of the lineup because I don't think I'm playing a whole lot of Sign Mirrors, and that's where this card is the best. Other stuff, I wanted a deck. Sign's just kind of broken, which is why I played it. The deck is just like way too good and definitely getting nerfed. I don't think anybody is delusional enough to think that this deck isn't getting nerfed, but I tried some various tech cards. I played some Reborn Grenadiers to make it better against aggro. That didn't really work out. I kind of had problems against aggro anyway. I played some Aloof Travelers to try and help with control decks. Didn't see any control decks, just saw a bunch of aggro. So it's always hard to kind of look back on lists and say like what was good and bad, because had I known what the meta was going to be going into this, I would have just played tons and tons of anti-aggro tools, because that's all I saw. But I don't know that in advance, and I think hedging for control was reasonable, but I'm probably going to be playing Sion at seasonals, and I'm not going to play this exact list. So
we'll see. But throughout the past couple of weeks, I've interviewed more Draven Sion players, and they tend to tell me that there's two kind of Sion lists. There's one list that is pretty much straightforward, kind of what you are playing, that's wants to go face, and there are lists that are slowing the game a bit down. They're playing more sentries, they're including values like Captain Farron. So why did you opt for this quote-unquote faster version?
Well, I would agree with that statement from other players. There's this like two kind of families of Sion decks, and I would even go further. Stuff like the Ruben bait deck, I would consider in the Sion family. It's obviously like well into the aggressive range. I mean, you're playing Legion Saboteur, you're playing Decimates, you're not even playing Sion a lot of the time. Like, but this like discard aggro shell kind of. I think mine is kind of splitting the difference. I don't have any flocks. I only have one sentry. The stuff like the person who actually beat me in the finals, Samantha Honey, has something that I would say is like very, very aggressive. There's fervors in it. I kind of split the difference because going into this event, I thought there was going to be a reasonable amount of Shellfolk. I think people are still pretty high in the deck from Alan's performance at Worlds, and Darkness because of also Yamato, not sure how to pronounce, but the runner-up at Worlds performance with Darkness. So I thought there was going to be a reasonable amount of both those decks. And I wanted to have kind of these aloof travelers, these survival skills, these whirling deaths to try and help with control. And I was also concerned about aggro and the mirror, so I wanted to place these reborn grenadiers. So I kind of split the difference. But I think now, in the context of this event, I will probably not split the difference. I think I'm going to go more for an anti-control version for seasonals, but splitting the difference just kind of in the abstract, I think is not the greatest, because you end up with like a little bit weaker against everything and just be strong into one thing and just accept that you have some problems into the other.
You said you would, looking back at the event, you would have changed this currently. So what changes would you have made if you would have known what you are going to face, if you had a better grip of what people are going to bring?
If I knew what I was going to play against, I would drop all the aloof travelers. I would drop the whirling death. I would play the third Poro cannon. I would play at least one Draven's biggest fan, and I probably would play a second Arachnid Sentry. So I have 5 slots to play with. So I would add an Arachnid Sentry, a Poro Cannon, a Draven's biggest fan, a Grave Physician, and not sure. I might go back to one Reborn Grenadier because it is pretty nice in open lists to always worry your opponent. But I would just not play any anti-control tools. I never played against control, so.
What decks would make you go to these changes? Like, what did you face specifically?
Ping City. I played a ton of Ping City. It was one of the more popular ones, and then also Ziggs Poppy to a lesser extent. But Ping City was definitely the one that I played just oodles and oodles of.
We're reaching this point where people can play a full burn lineup, like they can pair Pink City with Ziggs Poppy burn and they can just get away with it. They can even play Draven Sion just to spice things up, and there you have a lineup that can go above and beyond your opponent.
I would say we are very much in an aggro burn meta. There are at least two very strong burn decks, Ziggs Poppy and Ping City, and Draven Sion can certainly be built in that vein. Samantha Honey's lineup is a perfect example of this. Ziggs Poppy, Ping City, and Draven Sion with a burn flavor. So I think it's pretty good. The concern is you're not very good in the Draven Sion mirror, and other than specifically Ziggs Poppy, all of your decks die to Nami very, very badly.
All right, I'm going to get back to this question a little bit more because we're going to go forward to the deck that you just named. Refuses to die because it's somewhat consistent on drives itself at some point. Zoe Nami. Why did you bring it to the tournament as well?
This deck is broken. I actually do have the record for this deck because it was pretty obvious. This deck was banned in all but two games, in all but two matches, and it won both games. It did not lose a single game, and I was only allowed to play it twice. So the deck is broken. I don't really know what to say other than that.
I don't know. Maybe
I have some like weird tech choices.
Can you dive a little bit deeper into that then?
Yeah, I have some tech choices, but it's kind of hard to say anything conclusive about them from this event because I didn't lose games and I wasn't allowed to play the deck a whole lot. But I don't like Hush. That was a thing from, I think Alan was even advocating for that at the start of Worlds, but he didn't even bring it to Worlds, so I don't think he had a list with no hushes, but he was certainly advocating for it. There's just nothing you really want to hush right now. Sign's an okay hush target, but you kind of just demolish that matchup anyway. The deck is like super, super hungry for any way to spend spell mana early that doesn't feel awful. And so you just play like these otherwise terrible cards like Double Trouble, Super Cool Star Chart, Line 'em Up, Salvage. They're all horrid. None of them are good, but all you really care about is ways to spend spell mana early, and they're all fine at it. So Sleepy Trouble Bubble is kind of the most interesting one. It's really good against Poppy. That's pretty much it. You just stun Poppy, and they can't even attack with anything because you have Paddle Stars the second half. So you stun Poppy, and in essence, you stun their entire board because they can't attack with anything because of Paddle Star. And then you just don't cast Paddle Star on Poppy, and they lose.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you a bit more about this 4-mana spell slot because Salvage is obvious. You want some more Druid just to take you out from some dire situations, but Astral Protection, I've seen people playing instead of this just maybe Spell Shield instead of it. So why did you go for Astral Protection instead of, let's say, Bastion?
Astral Protection is better against kind of Noxus decks. It's very good against Ravenous Flock and Scorched Earth, for example. If anybody's still playing Noxian Guillotine, it's good there. Bastion's very reasonable. There's nothing wrong with Bastion. I've played Bastion. But it's kind of what do you want to defend against? Is it SI type spells? Is it Noxus type spells? And there's a lot of Noxus in the meta right now. So I prefer Astral Protection, but they're very interchangeable, and it's not a big deal which one you play.
Right. I've actually interviewed Hotam on the exact same deck, but not the exact same list, and he started running a few Zap Spray Fins. Why wouldn't you run them, or why would you run them in a specific meta?
I actually am probably higher on Zap Spray Fin than many people. I've seen quite a few people basically say Zap Spray Fin is unplayable. You should never register it. It's horrible. I think it's pretty reasonable. If I had a 41st or 42nd slot that I was trying to fill, it would probably be Zap Spray Fin that fills them. Sometimes this deck does have a problem of just running out of literal units where, I mean, you're only playing 15 natural units. Nami is kind of more of a landmark, and you really only get a few more from Double Trouble. It's pretty difficult to have a unit around, and Zap Sprayfin is one of the better elusives in the game. But in my opinion, the deck is pretty happy with the number of units it plays. But if someone wanted to play Zap Sprayfin somewhere in there, it's not a big deal. The main issue is Zap Sprayfin is best in decks that want to proactively play him on 4, because you just play Zap and attack with it. Tia Fizz was great at this. You didn't have great things to be doing proactively with 4 mana. Twist of Fate was really good reactively, but it wasn't very good proactively. And Zap is a very nice proactive 4 mana play. The problem is Starfish or Zoe Nami, whatever you want to call it, generally doesn't want to be proactive on turn 4. You want to try and move towards your Nami level up or move towards this Shelly turn. You want to be like hoarding a lot of mana, not doing a whole lot, maybe putting units into play. And Zap is just not very good at specifically that.
All right. We all know how Zoe Nami pops off when it actually gets the curve. Not even an insane curve, but this decent one. But how can you salvage games in which you do not draw your best? Or what are the games that are actually salvageable, if there are some?
So step 1, draw Nami. If that fails, step 2 is draw Shelly. If that fails, step 3 is draw Zoe. If you draw no Namis, no Shellys, and no Zoes, just scoop them up, go to the next game. You're not winning. Don't worry about it. Sometimes you cannot win. That's fine. The important part is converting the games where you draw Nami. You need to have something like an 80% win rate, 85, maybe even 90% win rate when you draw Nami. You need to be converting the games where you draw Nami. And you will lose some, especially against, I had a scrim game today where I drew Nami, I drew very well. My opponent was playing Bandle City Demacia, and they had the classic like Smith into Mayor, into 2 units, into Poppy, into Lulu, into Yordles and Arms Rally. And it's like, okay, my opponent also drew their nut draw. That's okay. It's okay to lose to the opponent's nut draw. If you're losing to kind of just the normal draws from your opponent when you drew Nami, you're doing something wrong. You need to figure out what you're doing wrong and fix it. Because if your opponent isn't drawing amazing and you drew Nami, you should be winning.
You put the ball exactly in my court, because I wanted to actually ask you, since you mentioned that you have the highest win rate on the deck, what are some common mistakes that people do or that you see people doing while piloting this deck?
I think the biggest like common mistake is double trouble. You'll often hear people basically say you just never play double trouble on turn 2. You always go bank, double trouble on turn 3. That's just not correct. You play double trouble on turn 2 against aggro all the time, but you also do it on turn 2 some of the time in other matchups. Something that I think people, it's relevant to this discussion of double trouble, but it's kind of more general purpose, is if your opponent draws like an aggro deck, it doesn't really matter what deck they are playing. They've shown you, at least for now, they're playing an aggro deck. So if Darkness goes like Otterpuss at a Catalyzer, you play double trouble on turn 2. Your opponent's playing an aggro deck. It might have Darkness in it, but they're playing an aggro deck. That's what they've shown me. And depending on what your opponent's hand can be, even like these very, very controlling decks can end up as aggro decks, and you just need to play double trouble on turn 2. Something else that kind of results in this is people kind of tunnel vision on, okay, I need to get my Nami leveled up as early as possible. So I need to just bank as much as I can. And Nami isn't very valuable without something to buff. So it's very okay to kind of delay your Nami level up by a turn or 2 turns or something if it lets you get something more relevant to buff or end up with a Nami in play in a more favorable position. Actually, in this event, I have a good example of a game with this that was on the mainstream. I was playing against Tony G in the semifinals. And I didn't draw Nami, so I was spending all of my mana every single turn trying to contest the board against Sion. And then on turn 4, I top deck Nami, and we just completely swapped gears. My Nami's at 2 out of 7, and I just like pass. Just open pass. Because all of a sudden I care about banking spell mana. and my opponent probably could have put me on a read that I drew Nami, but that's fine. I need to get my Nami leveled now because that's what my plan is all of a sudden. Prior to that point, it was completely fine to be spending a bunch of mana and just kind of hoping I didn't draw Nami, but Nami levels so quickly that you can actually just level Nami in 2 turns from almost no start, which is important to realize that you don't have to go all in on leveling Nami and until you draw Nami.
So the idea that you should play like you always draw Nami is a little bit wrong, or doesn't have
I would agree with
foundation?
that. Yeah, it's not that like you shouldn't play to drawing Nami as you're out. It's that like Nami is so easy to level, you don't have to bend over like backwards to try and level Nami. You can just kind of say, when Nami is drawn, I'll level her in a turn or 2, and that's going to be okay. Only when you end up in these situations where it's like, okay, I have a Sparklefly and I'm just going to die. Do you need to go? Okay, I just have to assume my next card is Nami and play as though my next card is Nami. Oftentimes in these games that are like manageable, you can just say, Nami's somewhere in my deck. By the time I find her, she'll be leveled, or if she shows up soon enough, I can recover.
Alright, so just to sum it up, a few of the common mistakes are people misjudging the matchup they're playing or the situation in which they're playing, and they're playing too much towards that Nami level up.
I would agree with that, yes. So,
Alright, problem fixed. Now guys, you know, you have the wisdom, we found the sack of gold. So we can move forward to the last deck. I'm gonna be honest, I did not expect Fizz Pop in Bandle Tree. So why did you bring it to the tournament? What was the meta call for it?
I'm not going to be the most positive on this deck because it was my worst performing deck by a fairly significant margin. It was regularly getting, well, I suppose regularly is the incorrect way of saying this because it got 2-0'd once, and that was against Samantha Honey in the finals. Tournament was single elimination. But it was commonly the deck that was losing matches. It had a lot of problems. I had to protect it a lot in ban phases and try and figure out how to ban to save my Bandle Tree matchup. The reason I brought it was Poppy is a broken card, so I wanted my third deck to play Poppy. Of the Poppy decks, I wanted a Poppy deck that could beat Sion because I have Nami. I think my opponent's going to be forced to ban Sion a lot, and I want to be able to leave up my opponent's Sion deck and just 2-0 without any problems. Bandle Tree seemed to be the best Poppy deck for beating up on Sion, and I played it for that reason. That didn't really work out. This deck lost to Sion twice. I did beat it once, I think, but it had a bunch of problems with Sion. It wasn't really consistently beating it, and the data since when I looked at this has shown closer to 50-50. This might be the best Poppy deck into Sion, but it has problems. It doesn't consistently win that matchup, and if it's not winning that matchup, I don't really have a point for bringing this deck.
So do you think that trying to counter Sion, let's say in general, is just a lost cause, or should people still try to go for a lineup that does that?
If you're going to try and counter Sion, you have to commit harder than I did. So Nami Zoe, great counter to Sion. Lee Sin Zoe, great counter to Sion. Can't really play those two at the same time. Some EU players are playing like Nami Fizz and Lee to try and get around that problem, but Nami Fizz is just a much worse deck than Nami Zoe. There isn't great options. You can go real deep in the weeds to try and beat Sion. You can play like these Aphelios piles that have Gravitum for Sion and just actual 9 copies of Eye of the Dragon because you've got Gifts from Beyond and Aphelios and Eye of the Dragon. But I'm not going to lie to you, that deck is probably unplayable into everything other than Sion. You can play like Karma Ezreal, that deck beats Sion. There's plenty of ways to beat Sion if you're willing to. The problem is these decks are not good. Like, you can, but if you're going to try and counter Sion, you have to commit to it because the deck is so strong that you can't just accidentally counter Sion with more than one deck. And I think it's not worth trying to counter Sion. I think you're going to run into too many problems, and you'll just get run over on occasion. Sion's a strong enough deck that it'll just beat its counters. And any lineup that is beating Sion consistently enough, 2-0ing Sion consistently enough to justify bringing, you're probably just going to have egregious problems against any other lineup that doesn't include Sion. And if you're playing seasonals across 9 rounds, I think you're probably going to see like at least 5 Sions, probably 6, maybe 7, maybe even more. But if you see 7 Sions and you just can't ever beat the people who didn't bring Sion, you're not making top cut because you're going to lose to a Sion. And you're going to go 6-3. And even if you've got good seating, you're dead. So.
All right, back to your lineup because you brought Bandle Tree, you brought Draven Sion, and you brought Zoe Nami. So, what were you expecting to face? So you brought this specific lineup, and was what you expected to face the things that you actually faced, or were there a few surprises down the line?
The amount of aggro I saw kind of surprised me. I mean, aggro's good right now. I wasn't like gonna disrespect aggro and bring, I don't know, freeze reel where you're just completely dead to anyone playing 1-drops. But the sheer amount kind of surprised me. There was a lot of lineups that were maybe not what people think of when you say triple aggro. Generally, when people say triple aggro, people are thinking like pirates, discard aggro, something else. I mean, that'd be a pretty old school one at this point, but people would be expecting like Sion, Ziggs Poppy, and Poke City for a modern variant, like what I played in the finals. But there was a lot of like Poppy Rally, Ping City, and then Sion. And it's like, okay, this may not meet the traditional expectation of triple aggro, but this is still a triple aggro lineup. And there was a lot more than that than I expected. There was a lot less control, although I do know there was control in the other sides of the brackets that I didn't see. Grandpa Roji made a reasonably deep run with triple control, to be completely honest. Thresh Viego, something and something. But there was a reasonable amount of control. I certainly didn't see it, but in Top Cut, it was just like almost mono aggro, and my tree deck and Nami, it was pretty rare to see anything other than aggro.
Is the amount of aggro decks concerning because we're going into the seasonal in less than a week?
It's changing my lineup. I'm not bringing Tree as a result. I'm probably still going to bring Sai and Nami, but I think my Poppy deck is going to become Poppy Ziggs at this point. It might be a different one, but I was not expecting the amount of aggro. Tree was a very bad bring into the amount of aggro I saw. So.
All right, but as I said, seasonal is near the corner, so from a player that actually made top cut several times, from a player that actually has that seed card back from the worlds, what would be your advice towards people that are trying to qualify for the top 42, or maybe it's their first time into a seasonal and they want a little bit of an age, that they want some info? What would you tell them to do?
So I would go into the seasonals with a plan for Sion. I think that's the most important thing for your lineup to have. If you are not banning Sion or trying to beat it semi-consistently, you don't have to be countering Sion, but we got to have some Namis, we got to have some Darknesses, we got to have something that's like, I'm okay playing into Sion. You need to rethink your lineup. If you don't have a plan for Sion, find a plan for Sion. This is not the point to not have a plan for Sion. Other than that, if you've got a plan for Sion, I would probably just commit to whatever 3 decks you're thinking right now, because if you continue waffling around decks, you're going to end up playing a deck that you have no idea how to play, and that's going to be far worse than playing a maybe worse lineup. I think people should be committing to lineups much further in advance than they think, because there's another statistician for LOR, Legna, is I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, but I presume it's Legna.
It is.
Legna. Okay, cool. Legna. He did a project to kind of quantify like what's the win rate of a deck on the first game people play on it. And the first game people play with decks like Shellfolk is just horrid. You've got like a 30% win rate. It's very, very bad. But as time goes on, when you're playing like the 20th game on a deck or the 30th game on a deck, your win rate gets very, very reasonable for almost any deck. And just playing decks that you're like comfortable on is worth quite a bit of win rate. And having a slightly better lineup might be worth some win rate, but 20% is a hard bar to overcome. So if your lineup passes the sniff test where you've got a Planet of Scion, you're not terrified of seeing people play Poppy Ziggs or Nami Zoe, I'd just lock it in. Just don't worry about these small ball issues.
I've seen in the last couple of seasons just interviewing all kinds of players, all kinds of winners, a trend which has become reality most of the time that people just bring their favorite decks that they know how to play. They are not concerned as much about the lineup as about the decks that they know how to play and that they are comfortable enough that even into non-favorable matchup, they know what they need to do.
Yeah, knowledge of matchups is really important. There was a stream with Cover24 that really stuck with me through time, where he was talking about Lee Sin versus Draven Ezreal a long time ago, kind of when I started playing lore. So it would have been like January or February or something. It was a really long time ago in digital card game terms. Anyways, he made this comment kind of offhand of like, I see people playing Lee Sin against Draven Ezreal, and they mulligan Guiding Touch in the matchup. They just ship Guiding Touch. They don't think they need it because Draven Ezreal was a much less aggressive deck at that point in time. And while it's good against Flock or whatever, it's just not that big of a deal. And he made this comment of like, if I see 2 Guiding Touches, I'm going to keep both Guiding Touches. I see 3 Guiding Touches, I'm going to keep all 3. Because the only thing that matters in the matchup is Scorched Earth on Lee Sin. And that kind of like deep matchup knowledge is so, so valuable. Or for like kind of like a less extreme example, the Thresh Nasus versus Draven Ezreal matchup. That matchup was just straight up Draven Ezreal favored until the Thresh Nasus player realized that the way they won was on turn 10, have 13 mana, play Nasus, immediately Atrocity. And as soon as the Nasus player knew to do that, the matchup was very bad for Draven Ezreal. And it's like, how often do you see this like chunk of knowledge that just like flips a matchup on its head? And those chunks of knowledge are so, so valuable.
And it's like the old saying, some people's garbage can be another person's treasure, so we just need to know what to make of it.
Yes, yeah, if you know how to play matchups, and this even works in reverse, where if you're playing a really weird deck, I mean, let's use Lurk as an example, because we've got some prominent Lurk aficionados in the community, and it's not the most popular deck. If you're really good on Lurk, your opponent's probably not very good against Lurk. Because there's not a whole lot of Lurk around. And playing these kind of off-meta decks, you can get this edge from basically playing a deck that people don't know how to do. Now, I'm not going to recommend like playing Victor and Nivea or something because it gives you an off-meta edge. But if your deck is meeting this like minimum bar for power level, where you're not just playing some absolute stinker pile, it's probably playable enough as long as you know what you're doing.
All right, but we are going near the end of the interview and I have a couple more, actually 2 more questions for you. First and foremost, did you prepare with anyone? Did you scrim or practice with anyone for this event in particular?
Not this event. I have been scrimming and practicing for kind of seasonals generally, but I did no intentional practicing for this event. So like Bandle Tree, was added to the lineup the morning of because I was like, okay, I'm going to play Nami Sion. I want to play a Poppy deck. Well, Poppy deck looks reasonable. Tree sounds fine. So there was not a whole lot of thought put into that part of the lineup, but I wanted to try it. I was viewing this tournament very much like practice for seasonals. But as far as kind of people that I do practice and scrim with, the Cup is Mine is probably my most common scrim partner. Kochua, Sergi Tuvamos, although Crossshard, and we used Worlds client for a little while to scrim, but that has been turned off, so we can no longer do that. Please bring back Crossshard so I can get bullied by Sergi. And then there's a group of people that I know from Magic that I scrim with some amount, but many of them have drifted away from lore. Just Whalefall would be the only one that, although now he goes by Whalefall, but they would be the other practice people that I have. So,
all right, nice. And one last question before we're wrapping things up. If you had to say only one thing to the people that are now watching, which one would that be?
It's probably slow. I guess, well, you said one thing, not one word, right?
It can be one word if you really want.
Okay. I would say slow down. If I'm allowed one concept instead of just one word, but
You are allowed. What? Actually, you made me curious. Why slow down now? More questions.
I think it is many people's largest weakness in card games is playing too quickly. I would include myself in that category, and just if you slow down, it will significantly improve your win rate.
Except for Mo. Mo needs to play like light speed.
Even Mo, I would say, could probably use to slow down. I mean, when you start getting to like Dinah, who just like ropes always, it's like, okay, your problem is probably not playing too quickly. But there are a lot of people, and I mean, like Majin has. Okay, we're gonna use this like interesting comment that I've heard. So there was a guy I know who said, if you've never missed a flight, you are arriving to the airport too early. Basically saying, if you're not playing with enough risk that you might miss your flight, you are wasting time. And you should be arriving to the airport later. And eventually, this is going to bite you in the ass, and you're going to miss a flight. And that's the acceptable cost of saving yourself 15, 20, 30 minutes every time you catch a flight. I would make the same claim about roping. If you have never gotten timed out and lost a game like Majin did in Worlds, where you didn't have the time to take an action, you're probably playing too quickly. You should be playing with more of that time and will eventually just get timed out on an important action.
I don't see people to lose on roping.
Yeah, if you've never lost because you roped out and couldn't take an action because you spent too much time thinking, you're not thinking enough. That should have happened to you.
If you're not thinking enough, start thinking. We're going to end on this note. Thank you, my guy, for being around and for enlightening us, because it was truly an amazing interview. Thank you for being around, and thank you guys for watching and sticking with us until the very end. Don't forget, just subscribe, hit that bell so you can get even more crazy interviews with these crazy people that can share with you a lot of knowledge. But thank you again, Drisoth, and other than that, guys, see you next time.